Alright, so now we're taking the inverse of a rational function, and notice how it says x cannot be 4/3. Why? Because that would make the denominator 0. So the steps are exactly the same with the rational function than with any other function. For inverse, first thing, f of x becomes y. Then the x's become y's and the y becomes an x. They switch. So x equals 8y minus 1 over 3y minus 4. Okay, so now our goal is to get the y's together to solve for y, right? So I'm going to make this into a proportion like that, and I'm going to multiply these two and set them equal to the product of these two, right? So that's going to be x times 3y minus 4 equals 1 times 8y minus 1. Distribute. Let me put the 3 first. So it's going to be 3xy minus 4x equals 8y minus 1. Okay, so I've got a y term here and a y term here, so I need them together. So I'm going to subtract 8y from both sides. Okay, so that's no longer there, that's 0. So I'm going to put 3xy minus 8y minus 4x equals negative 1. So now I'm going to add 4x to both sides because I want to leave the terms with the y's by themselves. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides. So this is 0. So I've got 3xy minus 8y equals, I'll put the x term first, 4x minus 1. Now I need to find a way to leave y by itself. So these terms both have y in common. So I'm going to factor out a y. The right side stays the same. I didn't do anything. There. So now I have y by itself, right? Kind of. It's still not isolated. But now, since I factored it out, I can divide both sides by 3x minus 8. And so now y is by itself. So I'm going to change the notation to f inverse of x equals 4x minus 1 over 3x minus 8. And I have to make sure that the denominator is not 0. So I'm going to say x cannot equal 8 over 3, because 8 over 3 would give me a 0 in the denominator. So that would be the inverse. Okay? So 55 is similar to 54. Same procedure. We're going to change the f of x to y. Notice it says that x cannot be 5/2 because that would make this denominator 0. Okay? Switch the x and the y. So this is x. Okay? I'm going to set this as a proportion and multiply, cross multiply. So then I get x times negative 2y plus 5 equals 1 times y. Okay, distribute the x. So that's negative 2xy plus 5x equals y. So again, notice I have two y terms, so I want them together. So I'm going to subtract y. That's 0. So negative 2xy minus y plus 5x equals 0. I'm going to subtract 5x because that one doesn't have a y, so I'm going to get it out of the way, move it to the other side. That's 0 right there. Let me move up here. So now I have negative 2xy minus y equals negative 5x. Notice how both of these have a y in common, so I'm going to factor out the y. minus 1 right there, because I factored out the y, so I'm left with 1. So next thing is I'm going to divide by the factor that's next to the y. So that's 1. So y equals, now notice there's negatives. I'm going to factor out a negative. I mean, that's just to simplify it. I'm going to factor out a negative from both the numerator and denominator, like that. See, when you factor out a negative, so a negative divided by negative is positive. So then I have y, f inverse of x equals 5x divided by 2x plus 1. Now I have to make sure that the denominator does not equal 0, so I say x cannot equal negative 1/2, because that would make the denominator 0. So here's the final answer.